The disabled tyrant's beloved pet fish. Transmigration. Chapter 31. Afraid that Jing Wang wouldn't believe him, Li Yu held up both of his hands for the other to see. Your Highness, please rest assured. I have no ill intent. Your eyes are really uncomfortable right now, right? They need to be cleaned as soon as possible. Jing Wang hesitated somewhat. This was actually the first time the two of them spoke properly. For some unknown reason, this youth invoked a feeling of familiarity with him. Even if he thought this youth was a thief at the beginning, that thought already weakened plenty after several cases of pursuit. To be honest, the other didn't seem to show any intent to harm him. If the warning letter for Ying Huan was really written by this youth and was sent by him, then it could be said that he had helped them. But why did he steal Xiao Yu during his first appearance? Jing Wang unconsciously went to look at the fish. Li Yu was terrified. He originally had a pillow that was the same shape as fish, but it seemed to have disappeared some time ago. Li Yu never cared about it. Therefore right now there was nothing in the fish bowl. Was he going to be exposed? He also looked over at the fish tank anxiously. Fortunately, Xiang Fen was standing right in front of the fish tank. The dog's body covered the view of the fish bowl completely. Li Yu, safe. Because Xiang Fen was in the way and the fact that Jing Wang's eyes were blurry, he could only see a round black shadow at most. Realizing that right now, he couldn't see fish clearly, Jing Wang shifted his view. Li Yu let out a breath of relief accordingly. However, Jing Wang still didn't look convinced. Li Yu was afraid that the other was still suspicious of him. In a moment of desperation, he grabbed Jing Wang's arm. Don't be suspicious of me. I'm really not a bad person. I only want to help you get that thing out of your eyes. When he was a fish, he often jumped in Jing Wang's hand and made a lot of regular contact with Jing Wang. For a moment, he thought he couldn't persuade this tyrant master of his. To Li Yu, hugging an arm wasn't really much. The only thing he was afraid of was Jing Wang thinking he was a bad person and wanting to kill him. Fish instincts taking over, Li Yu hugged him even tighter. Jing Wang. This was the first time Jing Wang met someone who blatantly disregarded etiquette. It temporarily threw me out of his wits, so he didn't push Li Yu away. Li Yu coaxed him by saying, "Let me give it a try. If it doesn't work, you can still deal with me then." Jing Wang. Jing Wang thought that it's not like the other can do anything right in front of his face. Might as well give it a try. For the time being, he fumbled to the table and sat down. Li Yu carefully wiped his hands clean and then found a new dry cloth. Making sure it wasn't wet at all, he finally sat by Jing Wang's side and gently lifted his eyelid to slowly pick out the powder that got into the other's eyes. Good thing there wasn't much powder. Li Yu's movement was very swift. Very soon, he got them all out. He could tell clearly now that it really was limestone powder. Li Yu once learned about it in the modern world. When calcium oxide dissolves, it lets out a large amount of heat. If limestone powder got into the eyes and someone tried to wash it out directly with water, it was extremely likely to burn the eyes. Fortunately, he was very prompt to change into a human to stop Jing Wang this time. Or else the consequence would have been too horrifying to think about. Afraid there was still some undiscovered powder remaining, Li Yu blew lightly into Jing Wang's eyes just in case. Jing Wang already felt much more comfortable. And he can also see clearly the youth before him. The youth was so close to him. Jing Wang can clearly see the youth's lowered eyelashes, his nose which was covered by a thin layer of sweat, and his earnestly puckered lips was a captivating red color. Warm air brushed past him. Jing Wang realized that the other was helping him by blowing into his eyes. He abruptly shifted his impolite gaze but ended up glancing at the youth's bare naked feet. The other's smooth and round toes were wet with water. Jing Wang's curiosity towards this youth was already growing bigger and bigger like a snowball rolling downhill. On Li Yu's side, he made absolutely certain once again that Jing Wang didn't have any more limestone powder in his eyes. Now, he can finally rinse with a large amount of fresh water. He remembered there was a wash basin in this room. The servants prepared water in the basin, which usually had boiled water cooled at room temperature. That could be used. Li Yu wanted to get the wash basin, but Jing Wang mistakenly thought he was going to escape. When he got up, Jing Wang immediately grabbed his arm tightly. Li Yu. Li Yu instantly knew what Jing Wang meant and didn't know if he should laugh or cry. I'm only going to get water. The powder has been taken out. You can wash your eyes now. However, even with this kind of assurance, the other still refused to let go. Jing Wang, whose eyes had pretty much recovered, got up himself and walked to the wash basin while holding onto Li Yu. When Jing Wang stood up properly, Li Yu could only reach his shoulders. Li Yu was just thinking about how to make Jing Wang sit back down when Jing Wang slightly lowered his head and looked at Li Yu with his dark eyes. This, was Jing Wang asking him to wash them? Li Yu have already personally experienced Jing Wang's stubbornness. With this awkward posture, he couldn't use a wet towel, so instead, he continuously scooped up water and used them to clean Jing Wang's eyes. After several repetitions of this action, Jing Wang felt his discomfort ease up some more, though his eyes were still red and swollen. For caution's sake, Li Yu still advised him, "Your Highness should let the Imperial physician take a look at them in a little while. You might need some medicine." Jing Wang nodded his head. Li Yu looked at him in the eyes for a moment before finally realizing that he had completely exposed his human form in front of Jing Wang by now. This was actually not a big deal. After all, it's not like he hadn't shown his human form before. The problem this time was that Jing Wang was holding onto him without letting go. He secretly tried to pull back his hands several times, but to no avail. He could only maintain his human form for half an hour. What if he performed a live transformation back to a fish in a bit? He needed to quickly think of a plan to send Jing Wang away, or send himself away. As soon as Jing Wang's eyes got better, he examined the youth before him. His gaze moved from the youth's face to the youth's garments. This time, the youth revealed two fair slender arms and was wrapped up over and over by a strange cloth, almost covering down to his knees. Below his shins were bare. His delicate ankles casually moved back and forth before Jing Wang's eyes. Jing Wang couldn't help but think, why was this person always dressed so unconventionally? Who are you? Jing Wang dipped into the water inside the nearby wash basin, and wrote these words on the table. He had many questions he wanted to ask. This was the first one. It was also the simplest to answer. Li Yu. Li Yu shook his head and pretended he couldn't read. It's not that he didn't want to say, but rather that he didn't really exist in this novel. It's not like there were records of him anyways. Instead of lying rashly and going through all the trouble of making everything work, he might as well not say anything. Perhaps, Li Yu suddenly thought, perhaps if he maintained his silence, Jing Wang would lose his patience and leave this room. He was very worried that he'd be hearing the countdown to indicate that he would be changing back into a fish any second now. That would be terrible. Li Yu was already panicking internally. However, externally, he still feigned a calm and composed appearance. Jing Wang saw that he didn't answer and continued to write questions. Why would you be here? Why save me? Li Yu suppressed his impulse to speak with Jing Wang again and continued to shake his head. Jing Wang furrowed his brows. He asked this much, yet didn't receive any answer. Perhaps the youth couldn't read it? Oh right. Jing Wang recalled the letter that Ying Huan received. The calligraphy on there were extremely terrible looking. Originally, he also thought it was strange that there would be someone with such horrible calligraphy in this world. So it was actually because this person couldn't read, so he couldn't write either? Jing Wang gave a glance at Xiang Feng. Xiongfeng didn't have any big reaction to this youth's appearance, which indicates that the dog was familiar with him. That's why he could use Xiongfeng to send the letter. Internally, Jing Wang was analyzing and comparing everything little by little. Li Yu felt his scalp go numb as Jing Wang continuously scrutinized him. He felt like he almost couldn't pretend any longer and needed to run away as soon as possible. Just at this moment, Wang Shigong, who went to summon the Imperial physician, came to knock on the door. "Your Highness, Your Highness. The Imperial physician is here." This was as the saying went, the heavens never seal off all exits. Hearing Wang Shi's calls, Li Yu's eyes instantly lit up. Jing Wang keenly captured his suddenly relaxed expression and immediately thought he planned to run away again. Jing Wang smiled a bit. The situation was already at this point, how could he let the other escape? The Imperial physician was just outside the door. Without Jing Wang's instructions, they didn't dare to enter. Wang Shi entered to ask for instructions. Immediately he saw Jing Wang was sitting leisurely in a chair with a strange youth wrapped into a tube next to his side. Because Li Yu was in such a bold and unrestrained attire and Wang Gong was way too shocked, Wang Gong mistook the tube for blankets. At first, he didn't even manage to recognize Li Yu. Wang Gong raged in his heart. He only went off for a second to find the Imperial physician, so why was there another little minx here trying to seduce His Highness? However, looking at His Highness's facial expression, he seemed not too angry. Jing Wang was not only not angry. Despite being ambushed earlier, his mood right now was strangely good. Wang Gong, who placed Jing Wang above everything, thought furiously fast. Actually, as long as His Highness was happy, a little temptress was not impossible to accept. It's best not to ask too much. Wang Shi just pretended he didn't see Li Yu and said respectfully to Jing Wang, "The Imperial physician is already waiting outside. Would Your Highness want to let them in?" Jing Wang didn't actually nod his head. Instead, he got up, tidied his clothes and hair crown and headed towards the door. Wang Shi immediately followed beside Jing Wang in response. Before Jing Wang went out, he specifically gave Li Yu a look. Li Yu didn't get the meaning at that time, and thought he was free. He exhaled deeply. Finally, he can change back peacefully. However, he still walked to the door nervously and looked outside while clinging to the door frame. The door wasn't closed tightly. He heard Wang Shi place a seat outside the door, only one step away. Jing Wang sat down there calm and composed. To the side, the Imperial physician had his head lowered as he helped Jing Wang check his pulse and look at his eyes. Li Yu. Oh damn. How could this person be this difficult? Li Yu used his transformation skill to save him, not to be trapped inside a room by him again. Li Yu had already seen the content of this room before. There wasn't even a window and there was only one door for entrance and exit. Originally the safest place has now turned into a cage that was impossible to escape from. Li Yu turned to Xiongfeng. "Good Xiongfeng, only you can help me now." Xiongfeng, who was completely unaware of the situation. The Imperial physician finished checking Jing Wang's pulse and then finished looking at his eyes and praised, "Fortunately, Your Highness cleaned them well. Your eyes are fine right now. This official will write you a prescription to detoxify your eyes. You'll be fine after you take them." Jing Wang's lips curved. He also thought the youth had cleaned it very well. Jing Wang ordered Wang Shi to reward the Imperial physician. After the Imperial physician left, Wang Shi thought Jing Wang was in a hurry to meet with the little temptress in the room and hastily called out to him. "Your Highness, today when you weren't here, someone broke into Jingtai Palace to cast poison." Wang Shi explained what happened in detail, including how the person snuck into Jingtai Palace, how their hand was bitten and injured by Xiongfeng, how the fish food was poisoned, how Master Xiao Yu knocked over the jade plate. Luckily the fish and the dog were both fine. Wang Shi mentioned this to Jing Wang because he was afraid the little temptress inside the room had dubious origins and wanted to warn his master to be more vigilant. Jing Wang was fine before. After listening to this narration, his face immediately looked like it was covered with frost. He felt even more furious than when he was ambushed himself. When Wang Shi mentioned the needle changing color, Jing Wang instantly recalled the white arsenic hidden inside the second prince estate. Most likely that man didn't think defaming the Chang'an palace was enough, and wouldn't even let his fish off. He will get revenge for this account sooner or later. Because of these words, Jing Wang also recalled the masked man that ambushed him as he returned to Jingtai Palace. That person's hand seemed to have been injured. Was that the same person that Wang Shi had described, who had been bitten by Xiong Feng? That was probably Mu Tianzhao's lackey. After returning to Jingtai Palace, he still didn't see Xiao Yu yet because of various reasons. He remembered again that the fish and the youth were both still inside the room. Ever since the youth helped him clean his eyes, he subconsciously felt that the youth wouldn't do anything to his fish. Wang Shi called, "Your Highness." Jing Wang indicated for him to first wait a moment and then stepped into the room himself. Before opening the door to the room, he suddenly had an indescribable feeling, even though he knew that it was impossible for the person to escape again this time. Jing Wang stopped thinking and decisively pushed open the door. What he saw was a completely empty room. A piece of cloth had fallen to the floor. The youth that should have been waiting for him has disappeared without a trace once again. This wasn't right. Jing Wang felt the veins on his temple jump. Although he left the room, he's been guarding the door outside the entire time. This room had no windows. Where else can someone escape to? After experiencing similar situations several times before, Jing Wang felt like he must change his train of thoughts, no matter how preposterous the new direction went. If it was impossible to escape outside, that meant the youth must still be here. However, he should be in a place that Jing Wang couldn't think of momentarily. Jing Wang walked to the curtain lying on the floor and recollected his encounters with the youth. He suddenly discovered many shocking details. When the youth appeared to help him, he didn't hear the door opening at all. This proved that the youth didn't enter through the door. Had that person been in the room all along and he had just never noticed? Just like right now? In a place that he couldn't find? Actually, it wasn't completely silent at that time. Jing Wang's hearing has always been exceptionally good. At that time, what he heard was the sound of fish tail moving. Xiao Yu often jumped around in front of him. He definitely wouldn't mistake the sound of tail swinging. Jing Wang couldn't help but look over at the fish bowl. The porcelain fish bowl inside Jingtai Palace couldn't compare to the crystal fish tank inside Jing Estate. Jing Wang couldn't see clearly with just a glance. Unexpectedly, however, Xiao Yu, who should have been staying at the bottom of the fish bowl, was currently hanging onto the edge, back facing him and wagging its tail back and forth. Thinking that his fish almost died, Jing Wang felt his mood dim some more. He walked over and was just about to give it a touch. Yet this fish ended up panicking and plunging headfirst into the water. Jing Wang. Jing Wang still used his hand to touch its back. Normally Xiao Yu would wrap its tail around his fingers, but today, it only raised its head and looked at him listlessly. Jing Wang thought, perhaps it's because Xiao Yu received quite a scare. Jing Wang comforted the fish as he continued down his interrupted train of thought, pondering about the youth's whereabouts. This room was narrow and small. It was easy to see everything with one glance. No matter what, there were no hiding spots. Jing Wang had a thought. Considering the places the youth had stayed before, why was it that every time it was always his room? Only devoted subordinates and Ying Huan knew of his return to Jingtai Palace this time. Why would that youth also meet with him again inside Jingtai Palace? And the way that the youth was dressed, he definitely couldn't have come from the Imperial Palace. Jing Wang got up, his cloud-designed boots stepping once more towards the curtain on the floor. He picked up the curtain. After moving the curtain, a hidden puddle of water was exposed from underneath. He remembered that both of the youth's feet were wet. He was reminded to check the room for trails of water. After an attentive examination, he discovered some heading towards the wash basin, some heading towards the table, and also some near the door. With all of these back and forth, the wettest areas gathered into a path. He followed this path in pursuit and saw at the end of it was only a large black furry dog. Yet Ying Huan's dog barked excitedly and wagged its tail at him. The place where the water gathered the most was where the dog was sitting. Jing Wang was stunned momentarily, thinking he must really be confused. So these water marks were created by Xiangfeng. Li Yu had been staring at Jing Wang's figure non-stop, extremely anxious. When Jing Wang finally left the room, Li Yu almost felt like he was having a nervous breakdown. There was really no other way. Afraid of Jing Wang figuring things out, Li Yu couldn't find a way to get rid of all of the water marks on the floor. So he could only let Xiangfeng take the blame. "I'm sorry. I'm not purposely hiding from you." The little carp silently apologized towards his master. Jing Wang walked out of the room, expression solemn. He brought with him the curtain that was wrapped around the youth's body. On this piece of cloth, there were a few fish scales sparkling and shining. This wasn't the first time he discovered fish scales on the youth's clothes. Jing Wang recalled a particular detail. When he looked at the youth's bare feet, he also saw a flash of silver light on the other's feet. He thinks he should know what that was. End chapter. The disabled tyrant's beloved pet fish. Transmigration. Chapter 32. Li Yu has been anxious and on edge that entire day. Now that the danger had been averted since he believed Jing Wang shouldn't have discovered anything, the little carp was able to peacefully lay down at the bottom of the fishbowl and sleep soundly. Xiangfeng, who made a great contribution, also stuck close to the fishbowl and slept like the dead. Meanwhile, Jing Wang paced back and forth outside of the room. The night breeze was slightly cold, completely blowing away his drowsiness. He connected all of his past encounters with the youth altogether. The fish scale that was found on his clothes, as well as the fish scales that were left behind on the curtain today. There's no doubt that they belonged to Xiao Yu. If these were the only cases, he might have thought that the youth touched his fish again. However, why would the same kind of fish scales appear on the youth's feet? The youth was all wet and was always dressed very peculiarly. When he appeared, Jing Wang never heard any footsteps but instead, heard the sound of a fish tail. Coming from some unknown place and then escaping to some unknown place, always making it impossible for Jing Wang to find him, yet at the same time, always appearing by his side. Jing Wang remembered that of all the people he dispatched in search of the youth, not one of them were able to get any information on the youth's whereabouts. When the youth escaped by jumping through a window, the guards lying ambush said they didn't see anything. When pursuing the person who sent the letter, the people guarding his room told him only the dog left his room. Everything that occurred was unexplainable with his current knowledge and reasoning. He felt like he was very clear-headed, yet suddenly he had an absurd thought. And now that this thought has taken shape, it was impossible to get rid of it. Because only this thought can explain everything that happened. After getting rid of all the impossibilities, there was only one possibility remaining. "Tianqi, is your room haunted?" These were words that Ying Huan once used to tease him. Jing Wang never cared about them before. Yet now, Jing Wang swallowed as his Adam's apple rolled. Ying Huan might have been very close to the truth. This youth wasn't human. As for what, the fish scales said everything. This youth was most likely Xiao Yu. With the moon high in the night sky, Wang Shi came over several times to convince him to rest. Jing Wang looked at the room where the fish was with a complicated expression and shook his head. He needed to think this through. He couldn't wrongly suspect a person and a fish just because of his own assumptions. Jing Wang disregarded the time and ordered Wang Shi to find servants from the Imperial kitchen to bring over some fish for him. Because Xiao Yu was carried out of the imperial kitchen by imperial consort Xu's cat, Jing Wang specifically instructed that he wanted fish just like Xiao Yu. Wang Shi went to do this. The servants of the imperial kitchen were unaware of the reason. They apprehensively brought over a basket of fish. Jing Wang carefully examined them one by one. These fishes all looked the same as Xiao Yu, but their fish eyes were dull and lifeless. Not only did they not wag their tails and jump around, they also didn't raise their heads to look at him. In comparison to Xiao Yu, they were missing the most important expression and spirit. Jing Wang let out a deep exhale. He should have figured out a long time ago that Xiao Yu was special. Perhaps because he had never raised a pet before, he labeled this specialness as Xiao Yu being very smart, lively, and rather human-like. Because even crows can show filial piety, he always thought that there was nothing wrong with a fish that was a little smarter than usual. No wonder he had always felt a sense of familiarity with the young man. He was his very fish. No wonder he always appeared on his room and followed him into the palace. Jing Wang himself have arranged things to be so. After raising it for this long, he had some genuine feelings towards Xiao Yu. Now that he found out that Xiao Yu wasn't a normal fish, Jing Wang pressed his lips together. To be honest, even though he saved Xiao Yu from the claws of a cat at first, Xiao Yu also helped him several times and saved his relatives at the Chang'an Palace. Jing Wang smiled bitterly. How could this mutual indebtedness be counted clearly? What was the best method for dealing with this? Close to early morning, Ying Huan finally managed to placate his future father-in-law, the king of Jinju. He rushed back to the imperial palace to report to the emperor. The emperor's mood was gloomy, so he didn't want to see Yeshizi for too long. After conversing courteously for a short while, he kicked Yeshizi out. Ying Huan was extremely exhausted, so he decided to seek shelter at Jing Wang's place, which was the closest, and ask shamelessly for a bed to sleep in. According to his current friendship with Jing Wang most likely wouldn't kick him out. However, when he hurriedly entered Jingtai Palace, he immediately saw the usually cold and collected Jing Wang looking deeply worried. Ying Huan secretly examined him for a moment. Although he didn't know what happened, he still decided to attempt to ask. He always worried about this cousin of his. Tianqi, what's wrong with you? Jing Wang slowly raised his eyes, looked at Ying Huan for a second, and then handed him the curtain. Ying Huan accepted it in confusion, weighing it in his hands. This curtain material was somewhat coarse and felt a bit wet. There were also some fish scales stuck to it. Ying Huan said with a laugh, "Did you wrap the fish in this?" Jing Wang was stunned. Sure enough, even Ying Huan also connected this with the fish. Jing Wang turned and ordered Wang Shi to bring over brush and paper. Then, he also dismissed everyone in the vicinity. Ying Huan felt that Jing Wang looked somewhat grave. This setup seemed like he was about to talk about some very important business. Ying Huan quickly held his breath in waiting. Raising his eyes, he watched Jing Wang thinking deeply for a second. Then Jing Wang raised his brush and wrote, "Have you ever raised a yao?" Jing Wang didn't think that a fish who could change into a human was a ghost, but instead, more like a yao, a fish yao. In other words, it was extremely likely that Xiao Yu was a carp yao. Ying Huan. What kind of question was this? Ying Huan answered in embarrassment, "I barely have the time to raise a dog. How could I raise that kind of thing?" Wasn't Jing Wang unconcerned with yao and ghosts? Why would he suddenly mention this voluntarily? This didn't seem like the usual Jing Wang. Jing Wang gave him a look of disdain, as if saying, "I just want to know if you ever raised one before." Ying Huan. Jing Wang paused and then raised his brush to write, "How does one raise a yao?" Ying Huan. Ying Huan was completely at a loss. "Why are you asking all this? Don't tell me you want to raise one? Don't even think about it. Just go raise your fish. Even if you've become interested in this kind of thing, it's best not to get involved with this kind of thing. In his heart, Xuěshān still revered gods and spirits. The Yao that Jing Wang was asking about also fell in that category. Jing Wang continued to ask, "Why can't I get involved?" Yet Ying Huan stammered, "That's Yao spirits, you understand." Jing Wang has never encountered Yao before, so of course he didn't really understand. "I just know you don't understand." Yet Ying Huan saw there was no one nearby and leaned close to Jing Wang to say in a lowered voice, "I heard Yao are very powerful, capable of bewitching a human's heart and reason. If a person encounters a Yao, they would get their vital essence absorbed by the Yao. Many stories were written this way." Jing Wang has never read such stories before. He felt they were very senseless. Hearing Xuěshān saying this in a very earnest manner, he felt like he might have been somewhat superficial. Yet Ying Huan said, "If you want to know, I'll send you some another day. You only need to read the stories to know, you definitely shouldn't get involved with Yao." Jing Wang furrowed his brows, "Why not? Do Yao kill?" Yet Ying Huan thought carefully. It seemed like in the stories, the Yao always enticed the scholars into marriage, then absorbed the scholar's essence until only his bones were left, before finally getting exterminated by some passing-by monk or cultivator. Yet Ying Huan said vaguely, "Maybe not kill directly, but it will definitely make you think death is more merciful than living." Jing Wang was instantly somewhat curious, if they don't kill, then how do they make you think death is more merciful than living? Yet Ying Huan was extremely embarrassed. Why did he have to discuss Yao with Jing Wang again? Was associating with a Yao a good thing or something? Why would Jing Wang be so interested in this? Jing Wang wrote seriously, "How do they absorb one's vital essence?" Yet Ying Huan, "I'll send you the stories tomorrow." Xuěshān, who originally only wanted to borrow a bed, really couldn't respond to this and ultimately kicked himself out of Jingtai Palace. Jing Wang was full of puzzlement over Xuěshān's speedy escape. Yet he still wanted to know a lot more. It looks like even Ying Huan, who was supposed to enlighten him, was unable to completely clear up his confusion. "Your Highness, are we going to return to the Jing's estate?" Wang Shi came over to ask Jing Wang. They originally entered the Imperial Palace this time to aid the heir of Chang'an Palace. Now that Xuěshān was unharmed, Wang Shi, who was good at guessing his master's thoughts, felt that his master might be wanting to return to his estate. Jing Wang nodded his head. He did need to return quickly. There were many eyes in the Imperial Palace. Hiding a carp was ultimately not very convenient. Therefore, Wang Shi went to order people to pack up everything that needed to be taken away. Though there wasn't much to pack actually. The most important was their master Xiao Yu, in addition to Xuěshān's Xiongfeng. Jing Wang instructed, directly send a dog to Chang'an Palace. As for Xiao Yu, over here, Wang Shi already skillfully placed the little carp into the crystal bottle according to Jing Wang's usual habits, and brought it before Jing Wang. Li Yu was extremely happy. After a good sleep, he felt much better mentally. He seemed to have also heard Xuěshān's voice. Didn't this meant that the second prince's scheme to frame Ying Huan was unsuccessful? Although he still hasn't received the notification of task completion yet, he couldn't think of anything else he could do. Jing Wang hesitated for a moment, not actually accepting the crystal bottle. It's one thing to be aware that Xiao Yu was a carp yao, but he still didn't know how to face this carp yao. It seemed somewhat awkward to play with the fish like he did before. Yet if he were to abandon the fish or send it away, Jing Wang's expression went cold. He immediately took the crystal bottle from Wang Shi's hands. After returning to the estate, he planned to secretly observe Xiao Yu for a few days. Before he had been searching for the youth that Xiao Yu turned into for a long time. Xiao Yu was actually doing its best to erase its traces every time. With this, Jing Wang could tell that Xiao Yu didn't actually want Jing Wang to know its true identity. Since Xiao Yu didn't want that, he would observe quietly without showing an outward change. He still didn't know why Xiao Yu came to be by his side and what it planned to do in the future. He can wait until he figures everything out clearly first, then lay everything out on the table. However, yet Ying Huan said that Yao made people feel like death is more merciful than living. Would Xiao Yu also make him feel this way? Jing Wang looked at the little carp's lively and healthy silhouette in the crystal bottle. Occasionally, the little carp would even turn its head and blow bubbles mischievously at him. Jing Wang couldn't resist letting loose a slight smile. Yet Ying Huan must have been exaggerating. He can feel it. This fish wouldn't hurt him. Or else he wouldn't have accepted the fact that Xiao Yu was a carp yao so easily. Li Yu spun around in a circle in the bottle, leisurely floating in the water. Ever since he got the crystal bottle, he didn't need to worry about anything wherever he went. Occasionally, he can even sunbathe. Jing Wang always held the crystal bottle very securely. Occasionally the water in the crystal bottle would sway back and forth, making the fish feel very comfortable. Li Yu swayed along with the water current in contentment. A scale actually fell off from his body with the swaying. Li Yu thought he saw wrong and quickly shook his head. It was real. He just realized that lately, he's been losing scales. Maybe it was because he's been thinking too much or because he experienced a fright. He wasn't a normal fish either, so he didn't know why he would lose scales. He joked about losing fish scales before, but it was just a passing thought. Now that he was really losing scales. Although he didn't feel anything whatsoever when his scales fell, and occasionally dropping one or two was fine. But, if he lost them continuously for a long time, would he lose all of the scales on his body? If a human lost too much hair, they would become bald. Was he going to be a bald fish? But he wasn't even that old. Li Yu actually couldn't imagine at all how he would look without scales. He also didn't know if he could still put them back again after the scales fell off. Fretting, he picked up the piece of scale and looked at the area where it just fell. The exposed area was fat and soft. Li Yu used his fish fins to give it a poke. It seemed like it's his fish meat. He pressed the scale against the flesh. What resulted was another piece of scale to the side also falling off. Li Yu. Did fish get some kind of shedding disease? Wang Shi was just observing the fish picking up the scale with its mouth and almost laughed out loud. Jing Wang shot Wang Shi a glance. Wang Shi immediately turned to look elsewhere, pretending that he didn't see anything at all. Jing Wang also saw the fish lose scales. He thought about the pieces on the curtain. It did seem rather serious. Even though it was a carp yao, this seemed rather pitiful. Jing Wang furrowed his brows and expressed to Wang Shi, "Go find the Imperial physician to give Xiao Yu a look." Wang Shi. Wang Shi felt like with this visit to the Imperial Palace, His Highness had already changed from having a fondness for raising fish to having an abnormal fondness for raising fish. Even the people in charge of checking Master Xiao Yu for illness have changed from the usual servants into the Imperial physician. End chapter.